iTestify is about testifying of what Jesus Christ has done and can do in each of our lives. Through testimony of people just like you, and through study of His Word, our prayer is to encourage each follower of Christ to be a light in this world. So let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father, which is in heaven. Matthew 5:16.
Hi, welcome to iTestify. We have with us a very special guest, which you may recognize, a fellow co-host of iTestify, Krystin Dolinsky. And she's going to be sharing with us her testimony about how God changed her life.
Thank you, Reed.
Yeah. So where should we start? Maybe childhood?
Yeah. I'd like to actually just share about how privileged of a childhood, I guess, childhood I had. It was, I was an only child, and I was rather quiet, but I was also rather interested in school. So I read a lot, and I did really well in school, and I was that person who always got good grades, who the teachers always liked. I was actually very quiet. Shyer than I am now, but that was what I was good at. I was always, I got most likely to succeed in high school. I was part of the drama club in high school, and
the literal drama club, not just being a dramatic person.
Yeah, exactly. No, the literal drama club. And, that was what I was known for. That was my talent in school, was singing and acting. And, so everyone sees you on stage, and then you're really good at school, and then I got into a really good college. So it just seemed like in my childhood, I was set up for success.
Was this something that your parents encouraged, or they just thought it was kind of cool that you did, or
that I acted?
Yeah, because my mom always wanted me to do something, So
the thing was that my family were kind of the black sheep Asians.
Okay.
Everyone around us were doctors and in the medical field. But for me, I think what my parents wanted was just that. They supported me in whatever I was interested in. So it just so happened that I loved to sing, and then that really led to acting.
Okay.
And so I acted in a lot of high school plays and high school musicals. And, it was like, well, you're geared for this now. So come in high school, my sophomore year, so I was 15, 16 years old, and I was scouted. That means basically these youth managers. Now, I went to a private school in Los Angeles, so it was very common for youth managers during the day, I don't know if they still do, but during the day to basically go around, and they would sit and look for new talent. And they would do that by going to high school musicals and high school plays of these renowned high schools in the localized Hollywood area.
Okay, because I was like, that did not happen for me.
So, well, and my first manager sees me there, and he asks me if I wanted to do this basically professionally, professional television and film acting. And so my parents and I sat down, and they said, hey, you're old enough to make your own decision now. Do you want to try this? And I said, yeah, sure. But my personality was such that everything that I did, I had to do 110%, and I had to commit myself to it. So there wasn't ever like a trial. There wasn't ever a trial period where it was like, yeah, okay, let's see how it goes. When I was in this, and I signed that contract, I was in it.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, in my head,
commitment.
Yeah, it's over commitment,
right.
But it's commitment for life. And so at 16, I said, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And so I'm going to school and starting to act professionally in film and television. And this, of course, is different from theater. It's different from being on stage. And it's also different from doing commercials, even though commercials, I also did those. But mainly, my agent and my manager focused on getting me work in films and television series. Guest stars as well as regulars. And it was certainly a wake-up call for me. I just remember getting headshots for the first time. I didn't wear makeup. I didn't know what it meant to be camera ready. I barely looked at myself in the mirror. So there was a whole entire kind of paradigm shift where you started realizing that it meant something how you looked on camera. So, your weight became an issue. My weight became an issue. The kinds of clothes that I wore.
Was this something that you self-enforced, or was it something that was told to you?
It was something that was told to me. And at that point, I think youth managers, they have that sense of they're your teacher, they're your mentor, and they're your guide into this new foray. Because it is a very, very different world. And so, anyways, the tighter clothing that you had to wear, the more revealing clothing that you had to wear, because the whole entire point of now my existence that I had committed 110% to, my entire existence was to look good in front of the camera and to get that job. And whether I realized it or not, that started to become my reality. And, there were so many times I think that I could have just pulled out and been like, okay, that, I gave it a good shot. I gave it a good go. But I didn't. I worked through high school and into college. I didn't take a break. I remember... Was
the money a draw as well? Or just more?
No, it wasn't at first, because I'm a purist, so it was like, yes, the craft, this is my art, like But what was really interesting is that all of these things that you're saying, the money, the fame, things that may have attracted other people to the business and didn't attract me at first, eventually you become maybe what you hate. Or you become what you say you never are going to be. And that really did start to happen to me. Money, gaining money, having that celebrity, and I never did have the celebrity. I was a working actor, meaning that I wasn't an A-list actor, but I got constant work as guest stars and certain movies and things like that. And there is a difference between background acting, so extras,
right,
and then
voice.
For example, people with speaking lines.
You get paid a lot more if you actually have a speaking line.
It's true. So those were the kinds of roles that my agent, my manager wanted me to go for. They wanted to make a star. Everyone wants to make a star. But what it was overwhelming. And it was all-encompassing. And with my type of personality that I think committed 110%, I really I gave myself no other choice but to go down that path. And I did it for 16 years. Now, I actually grew up as a Seventh-day Adventist, but I wouldn't even call myself a cultural Seventh-day Adventist. I just knew that we went to church on Saturdays. That was basically it. And I stopped going to church, actually well before I started acting professionally. So that really wasn't something that I ever really thought about, but I still at this point when I was acting believed in God. I believed that he existed. I don't think I knew him.
The God of your own making, though.
Correct, yeah. And maybe the God of my childish understanding, because, we read the Bible stories and I was familiar with them. But I don't think I had a correct understanding of him. I think that my understanding of God was someone who did something for you because you did something for him. So a quid pro quo kind of relationship. And that was just something that was perpetuated in my career. I did something for someone, someone did something for me. And that was basically what work was. So I got to the point, you know, this was maybe, I'd been doing this well over a decade. And I was working pretty consistently. And as I said before, when I started in childhood, you know, I was pretty much geared for success. And I was used to not ever failing at anything. And I was used to working hard. It wasn't that things were given to me, but I was very driven. And so it came to this point where I changed without realizing I changed. So like I said, the fame became really important, which really made me a very proud person. I was, you know, in my early 20s, I had bought a house. I was a regular on a TV show that filmed in Hawaii. I bought myself a really nice car. I was partying and drinking and just thinking that I could do all of these things and be a successful actor. And what was going through my brain subconsciously was that I really didn't need anyone. And I could do everything myself. And like I said, it was set up that way. I was not going to fail simply because my sheer will said I was not going to fail.
Which got you pretty far.
It does get you far, right? But there always is a point where there's a breaking point for someone.
It's also, what are you willing to give up in order to get there?
Exactly.
Some people give up a lot of things they never would have.
And that's what it is. It's that creeping compromise, right? And so, for example, when I first started acting, my manager said, you know, I have an important question to ask you. Would you ever do nudity? And I said, absolutely not. No. And that was, you know, my morals. And I was going to stick. Yeah, I took a stand by it. And I was serious about it. But, you know, you're 16 years old. And then a decade later.
16?
Yeah, because he's thinking long term.
Oh. Well, yeah. Even asking that early, it's like, why even ask that early? It's, you can say yes now and no later, but even if, anyway,
it's important. But it's important. But the thing is, that's the way the industry is, right?
Wow.
So you're making, you know, they start young, and then you make a certain type of person, and then, you know, 10 years down the road, I find myself and I'm like, wow, I'm getting more and more roles where they're asking, you know, this is when the HBO shows and everything were getting really popular. I don't know, you guys all remember.
Depends on the show, but
Yeah, and it was like, graphic nudity required, graphic nudity required. And it was like, man, if I want to be successful in this business, I'm going to have to do it. And I remember making that decision and going, I'll do it. I'll do it because I want this role. And so when that becomes your God, right, we each have one if we're doing idolatry, whether we realize it or not, and you don't have the real God in your life, then you're going to do whatever it takes to get to that. And I was in that, I had brought myself to that position, you know, like 10 years down the road. And so...
It's like a slippery slope because it's never enough. There's always going to be something else that they're going to ask you that you didn't want to do.
And you're always controlled by whatever the trend is, right? So like I said, what was really popular at that time were the HBO cable shows. So they could do graphic nudity. They couldn't do it on regular television, but wow, these hour-long shows were becoming really popular at that time. So your morals change
with their morals.
With their morals, or with whatever their trends and the fashion of the day is.
Yeah, and just on the other side too, I was just thinking, as someone who's just viewing these things, you may think I'm never going to see this or watch this or whatever, but you still have that mindset. It just transfers over. Like you can just watch something now and you're a part of that.
Right.
Yeah, so. That's interesting.
They actually did a study on that too.
Oh, really?
Where it's the mirror neurons, I think, that we have. So even if you're not doing it, by watching it,
Yeah.
It's like you participate in
you
it.
participate in it.
Yeah.
So, not knowing any of that, here I am. I'm in my early 20s, and in my brain, or I guess, like observing me, you'd think, oh, okay, she's pretty successful at a young age. She already has all this money and stuff like that, and she's just barely out of college.
It wasn't like, you finished college.
I did,
so,
yeah.
I mean, as far as the world standards, even if you weren't doing acting, it's like, oh, you went to a good school, you finished it, and you have a job. It's like, well, you met the standards. Well, you just exceeded that, because it's like, well, now you're in the realm of society where only a certain class of people get to participate, acting and singing and that type of thing. So you're above par as far as the world standards.
And it was important for me, like I realized that, and in my own head, all it did, I think, was just like really buffet my ego. And I always was above par, and there was no way that I wasn't ever going to be above par in my own head. And I had developed, and I wasn't like that as a kid, but I think just over the years, you develop these things that you don't even really know that you have. And I certainly, I don't think, was aware of how proud I was, but I was. And so, and I remember at that point, just really, and it's so funny because it's like, why would you suddenly think of God at this time in your life? You'd actually probably think, oh, well, why would he even be in your sphere? He's been in the background for so long. But the point that I came to mentally, for me, and I remember this, I was sitting at home by myself, and I literally said, well, maybe there isn't a God, because I've done all of this by myself, and through my sheer will, I'm going to choose the trajectory of my life, and whatever goal I choose, I'm going to make it happen. And that automatically, makes you think, well, then there's not a God. And so, I don't know, I just thought it was so very interesting that, even people who think, oh, I have no relationship with God, like what is it all about? It really all comes back to God or no God. Or God, or I should say God or the devil. To this great controversy. And whether I realized it or not at the time, that's really the decision that I was making. And I remember once I made that decision consciously to myself, that's when everything in my life began to change. And just one after the other, I stopped being able to get work, which meant that I couldn't pay my mortgage, and I was vastly overspending. I had absolutely no financial sense whatsoever, because I wanted to live the life that I wanted to live. I wanted to live that rich life that I wasn't quite there yet. So I stopped being able to pay my mortgage. I stopped being able to pay my credit card. I stopped being able to party and live that whole life and buy those, $800 sunglasses, which I was buying. That's not an exaggeration. And very, very quickly, life changes for you. And all of that, bravado that I had before of that I can do this, it was so very simple all of a sudden that I could not. I couldn't do it. Like, I broke up with my boyfriend. My grandfather, who I'm very close to, had a massive heart attack and had to have open heart surgery. And all around this time, so it's like everything in your life's crumbling, right? And then right around this time, I had to foreclose on my home. And so pride-wise, I didn't tell anyone. I was so humiliated, for me especially. And that was the thing. So I didn't tell anyone, and I had to move back in with my parents. And
they weren't that close to Hollywood.
Oh no, yeah, they were a good 45 minutes away, an hour, and so it was a real big blow to my ego. But it was in that moment that I really, again, started to do some thinking, and the first thing that popped into my head was that I really want to go back to church, which is so strange because I hadn't been there for, well over a decade. But it was just that one place where it was like, where was the last time that you felt like at peace, felt happy? And not like this superficial kind of happiness, but really that intuition, that gut feeling that you have that, okay, you're where you're supposed to be. You're not fighting against yourself, I guess. And so I remember I was sitting with my grandfather in the hospital, and he had just gotten out of heart surgery, and my whole family were sitting around. So to cheer him up, I said, what are some of the things that you want to do when you get out of the hospital? Let's make like a bucket list and do them. And in my heart, like I've been saying, I want to go back to church. I want to go back to church. And so he was, he listed. My grandfather's a very simple man. He doesn't really want anything. So he's like, I don't know, go get ice cream or something like that. And so, I just suddenly blurted this out, like, well, let's go back to church, and I'll take you. I'll drive.
And it could be partially, I don't know, I'm kind of reading into it, but it could be partially that you were using him as an excuse to go.
I was.
To take him, but you really wanted to go.
Yeah. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Of course, I didn't admit that to myself. Because,
I'm taking him
steps.
For his sake. That's why I'm tagging along, because he needs someone to help him.
And so I'm being the good person, right? I'm being the helpful person. It's nothing that I need.
Right.
So I was still at that phase where I thought I was something more. And so, it came to pass, a few weeks later, he did go out of the hospital, and we went. I took my grandma, my grandpa, and I went to the church that I grew up going to. And then eventually, a few weeks later, I started asking my dad, hey, do you want to come with us? And so he just said, sure. It wasn't hard. He just said, yeah, I'll go. And, my family, they're a family of Seventh-day Adventists, but we had all dropped out of the church.
Yeah, they have testimony of their own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They hadn't been going for as long as I hadn't been going. And like I said, it was no hard feat. And a few weeks after my dad and I started going with my grandparents, then I asked my mom, my uncle, and eventually we just all started going back, just as though we had never left. And I was learning a lot during those times. I had actually never been baptized. And so there was this time where, you kind of go on two tracks when you're still in the world, and you're halfway in the world, halfway going to God. And I was walking those two tracks pretty much simultaneously. I was still acting, but I was also learning, and I started reading the Bible for myself for the first time. And little by little, I was getting more and more convicted that something was wrong with what I was doing, acting-wise. And for me to explain it all, I think it would take a whole other show to explain all of the things, but I was basically convicted to quit acting. And it was to live the life that God wanted me to live. I'll just say it in a nutshell. That it wasn't to pretend to be someone else and to fill my brain memorizing someone else's lines and doing the actions that someone else wrote and what the director wanted me to do. And that's just acting in itself, not to mention all of the networking that goes along with it, all of the behind-the-scenes stuff.
And the lifestyle.
And the lifestyle, which it just, like I was saying, it's creeping compromise. It perpetuates itself.
It can literally make you into a new person. You think like they're making you into something for something, but they literally are just changing who you are so they can do whatever they want.
And so, and every job is that way. And
wow, so you have no identity, kind of.
Right, you don't. Like, and so I wanted to have my identity in Christ. And reading the Word, it was simply just reading the Word. I wasn't doing any Bible studies. I didn't have any group Bible studies. The church that we were going to really didn't reach out to us in that way. So I was just doing my own study, and that just came of my own study and watching online videos. And so it came to the point where, you know, I actually wanted to start working for the church, and in that time it was media. I can do, you know, documentaries and things like that, and about Seventh-day Adventists. And I was so fascinated with like young Seventh-day Adventists because I had never had that experience, and I was on fire for her, and I was like, wow, these young people, man, I just want to know all about how I can have my own personal relationship with God, and how can I share that with others through media. And so I was, you know, walking these 2 tracks and then saying, you know what, one day I was just super convicted, and I said, I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit acting. And then I got a job. And I said, okay, well, after this job, and then I'll quit. And it kept on happening, after this. Oh, after this one pilot season, after this, I'll quit. And this would have gone on forever. And then finally, I remember it was in the new year. I was actually about to start this documentary of young Seventh-day Adventists. And I had a job at the same time, an acting job. So again, I was living these 2 lives that were coming up. And finally, I went to a table read one day where you read the entire script for this job. And at the end of the table read, I was fired. And it was the first time that I had ever gotten fired. And it changed everything for me. And it was a big slap in the face. And I said, oh, I had promised God that I was going to quit all those months ago, and I never did. And to me, for me, that's what God needed to do, and bring my pride down in the dust. And that's what he needed to do. And I quit a couple days later, and I have never looked back, and I've never regretted it.
That's awesome.
And that is the one half of my story. Yeah. But it is how I came to Christ. And
just to, you know, maybe add a little tidbit in there, the documentary you're doing on young Seventh-day Adventists, one of those young Seventh-day Adventists, it was the bicycle club that you were kind of recording, these Adventists that recorded. One of them became your husband.
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
God,
that's a pretty instrumental part of your life.
Yeah.
And also how I met you.
Oh, right.
And how I met you. We all go to the same Sabbath school, and that was also how my husband and I think, came to Christ and to know him better. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Kristi. I've heard it a little bit before, but it's always great to see how God is working in all of our lives and how he orchestrates it in amazing ways, and led you to work for him and work with him. So for all of you at home who are interested in doing that, please reach out to your local communities, and you can tune in again on LLBN.TV. Thank you.